Have you ever been gaming or working online classes and your internet service constantly gets interrupted? First Nations Fiber is about to ensure that just won't happen again. Get ready for high speed at a new level. Click on fnfiber.com and sign up today. First Nations Fiber, empowering people through connectivity.
Gwe Kahnawake. This is Brent and Adrienne from KSCS. We're coming to you today and for a few recordings at least on this limited series podcast focusing on somatic healing, what it's all about and why we're doing this, and hopefully introducing you to some healers from town who are also helping us to cultivate these pathways towards healing. So I'm Brent. I'm a psychologist at KSCS. Been working in this community for about 5 years now.
I'm Adrienne. I'm a primary prevention worker at KSCS. You've probably seen me around the community, heard me on the radio. I've been coordinating Spirit of Wellness now for several years, not consecutively, but I've done it a few times, and that's actually how I met Brent. Was through coordinating Spirit of Wellness last year. So generally, we put out community invitation for all organizations or even community members just to come in and share their ideas of activities and different things they would like to promote in the community regarding wellness. And Brent actually reached out to the coordinating team and he had an idea regarding somatic healing. And from there, just in the meeting, there was a lot of ideas that had branched out. And with that, we were able to put on some workshops this year and bring in some healers who discussed their services, what they do, the benefits of what they do. And we were able to do some yoga as well. And we had our first somatic healing fair in April of this year. And it was such high energy. A lot of the participants who came in had so many wonderful things to say about it. We had a lot of community members who stayed for actually the majority of the day, right? They came in, they did some healing sessions, and they engaged in some talking circles. And we had 3 guest speakers that day who spoke about many different topics. And it actually turned into talking circles. It wasn't advertised as talking circles, and just the way everybody came together and was able to talk together, I think was more than what you and I had imagined, right? And it just shows like that need for healing, and that when people come together who need to heal, a lot of things happen. We learn a lot of things from each other, and we heal together because of the things that we've experienced, right? And a lot of the times, even though we may not have experienced the same events, it's kind of amazing to see how you can heal together in that way, even though you don't know, you can't relate to what that person's experienced. You're still able to do that together. And I feel like I'm kind of going off into I'm rambling off right now, but it's because I'm stuck in that moment from the healing fair, looking at everybody just being together and talking. And the circles actually ran a little bit longer than anticipated because the speakers were allotted for a certain amount of time, but community members were just together talking, healing, and sharing together. And that's not something that we could have ever planned for, but it came together so beautifully, and people left with such high energy, and they were feeling really great about what had happened at that event. And they asked for more of it. Can you please do more? this was really beneficial. It's really needed. People looking for more places to go to get healing, and maybe not necessarily Western healing methods. People want to try different avenues, and that's what we're trying to provide to the community. Is I can't even say it's alternative healing, because these healing practices are like the original method of healing, right? We're just trying to bring that back again, going back to our roots, if you say. And so we're trying to bring that back, and really just keeping that like Zinyu Hoda too, because it's who we are. That's our ways. That's our ways of healing. And it's really important. It's really important to heal.
Yeah, I like that. These original roots. And so that actually ties into what we wanted to do today together, Adrienne and I, sort of as we keep trying to build the momentum or cultivate the momentum for these kinds of healing pathways. We thought maybe it would be a good point in time for us to step back a little bit and maybe allow people to get a little bit of an idea of why us, why is it Adrienne and Brent who are doing these things or putting these things on. So today we're hoping to share a little bit of our own stories and our own journeys towards healing, and how we came to this place.
Yeah, so I can start. In December of 2022,
Take your time.
I experienced a significant loss in my life. My husband died unexpectedly, and it turned my whole world around. And in the early stages of my grief, I guess there was a lot of adrenaline for me, because people who have lost loved ones know that there's really no time to grieve after it happens, because you're so caught up in making plans, right, for how you're going to send this loved one off. And there's a lot of logistics and people contacting you, to make arrangements. And after that, the process continues, because you're closing their estate and you're doing all of these things, right? So you're busy and you're just going. And we were just, as a family, getting things prepared. And it was just a busy time, and it was just before Christmas too. So you're busy with prepping for the holidays, and then this unexpected event happens, and now you're faced with dealing with that loss. And the grief doesn't really begin, because you're so overwhelmed by the amount of preparations you have. So all of that happened, and a few days later, it's Christmas, and it's not a happy holiday for everyone. But when you have children, you've got to make it as exciting and happy as possible, and trying to make the best of it. And then going into the new year, and there was no time, I feel, to grieve until after the new year, because again, you're so caught up in all of this paperwork and all of these things, and then the holidays. So I really only started grieving in the new year, and it didn't really feel real to me. And I don't think that any loss has ever felt real to me. I've always felt like, I'm going to see this person again at some point, but physically in person. And I think it got to a point finally where I realized, and it hit me, that I wasn't going to see this person again. because they weren't coming home after work, because I wasn't seeing them in the morning. All of these things change. And then I was in a really dark place, and I just felt very alone, despite having people around me. So I had my friends, who were bringing me food. I had a friend that was checking my mail for me because I said I can't leave my house. People are looking at me, like I'm getting these looks, and it's uncomfortable for me. And I don't want to leave home because I really feel kind of like the center of attention in a really bad way. And she took my post office key and she was at my house delivering my packages, She was bringing me food. And my family was there for me too, just whenever I needed a moment. They would help out by taking my kids. So my husband and I have 4 kids together. And so that as well, right? It's looking after your little ones, because how does it affect them at such a young age? So it was just a very heavy feeling, like you're carrying your grief and carrying like your children's grief. And we all grieve at different times, right? So some people might grieve right away and others don't until later on. And my kids didn't grieve right away. So, and I did. So I really had to fake it, I really had to be okay. But for me, by March, so we're looking at like 2-3 months in, I'm really feeling like I can't carry this anymore. It's heavy, doesn't feel nice, and I don't want to continue to carry all of this. And I spoke with my family doctor, and she actually referred me to the traditional medicine program at the Kahnawake hospital. And I was open to it. I went in and the team just walked me through, like, this is what we do. There's no right or wrong way to do it. There's no time limit on it. It happens as it happens. Just like grief, right? It's unique to each person. It's going to be your own experience. I was like, okay, this sounds good, and I think it's worth trying. It was a rough start, as any healing journey is when you first get into it, right? It's just very difficult. It's hard to share. It's hard to relive. It's hard to be vulnerable in front of people that you don't know very well. And I was fortunate enough to have such wonderful people there supporting me, and they're just validating everything and doing ceremony for me and really guiding me. I felt like my hand was being held as I was getting through the journey, because there was just this love. Like, they really are genuine people and are genuinely caring and want people to heal and be well. And I felt that. I felt that at every session. So I continued to go, and I was able to do a program as well over that summer. I feel like that's what turned things around for me as well, is I was with about 4 other women. We all had traumatic events. We didn't know one another personally, but by the end of these, it was about 8 to 10 weeks. By the end of it, we were so connected, just really rooting for each other, because you see the growth. You feel it within yourself and the progress you're making. But when you're in a group and you're evolving together and healing together, there's just something that is so much more powerful about that. Having people rooting for you is also healing. I left the program and I just felt very empowered. I probably felt like the best I've ever felt in my life because I had conquered something so difficult, but because so many people were just behind me, supporting me. If I didn't have those people, I wouldn't have been able to heal the way that I did. So I think it's difficult to share your experiences, to talk about them, but it's very healing. It feels good to just release it, not suppress it, and not hang on to it, because that's the only way you grow. And that's what I've learned over like the last year and a half, is just releasing things. You know, if it doesn't make you feel good, you have to let go of it, because it's going to just hold you back in life. That's what I've started to do. Just if it's not serving you, you have to let go of it. That goes with anything in life. So I let go of a lot of guilt and a lot of really deep hurts and deep feelings. And I was able to accept that it happened and that it's okay to be happy, right? Because in grief, our emotions fluctuate, right? So we start to feel happy and laugh, and then we start to feel guilty. Like, oh, I think I'm always supposed to be sad and I'm always supposed to be down. I shouldn't be laughing or I shouldn't be happy because this event just happened. And maybe it looks insensitive, or it looks like I don't care, or that it doesn't matter. But I think that's an important thing to remember too, is that in grief, there's the lows, and you do have those highs as well, where you can be happy, you can enjoy life, and you don't have to feel that guilt because that person is there and they aren't here physically, but their energy is still around, and they would want you to be happy and not to drag on through life with this like cloud over your head, right? And those are things that I learned to accept as well, because everybody will tell you that, like, this person would want you to be happy, but you have to get to a point where you actually believe it as a person, because you could hear it 100 times and still feel guilty for, you know, laughing at that joke or having a really great day. But yeah, I think it's important to know that too. During grief, you're allowed to be happy. You're allowed to laugh, and there's no guilt in it. There's no guilt in having good days. There should be no guilt in when you decide to go on your healing journey. It doesn't have to start the following day. It's at your own pace. And I want to stress the importance of all of that, because it's really not linear. I feel grief is just the most complex thing to experience in life, because we all experience it, but it is just so different for everyone. And that's part of why when you approached the coordinating team with some of your ideas, that I felt so passionate about, let's do more of this. Let's have workshops. Let's do like a bigger event, because I know there's a need for people to heal, because we all hold on to so many things. We think that with time, it'll just go away. If we just, it's okay, it's going to go away in time. And it doesn't. It's okay to reach out for help, right? It's whether that's like to a friend, a family member, a support worker, therapist, traditional healing, traditional counseling. It's so important, because people are here for you. And that's another thing I learned too, is they weren't here for me because it's their job. There was genuine like heart and caring put into my healing journey. I felt like I was part of like another family because of the way that they made me feel in all of this. when people give you that, it's so uplifting and it's so selfless. It's just, it's unexplainable how it feels, but it really helped me. And without these people, I'll say it again, like, I don't know where I would be today. So that's where my passion for all of our somatic events stems from. It's from personal experiences, but also everybody giving me all of these tools and all this help and support. It really inspired me to want to do that for other people. And I hope that we can continue to do that.
Thanks, Adrienne. Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Because like I'm hearing you speak about like this wisdom of being together, like and how the healing that is. And I'm wondering too about, you've spoken about it, but I'm wondering too about like what wisdom or some of it, have you discovered just, in your own body, like like along this path, what is your sort of, what has the body told you about healing?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, well, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question correctly, but I'd say from the beginning of my grief, it was a lot of it felt like just surviving, right? A lot of times I didn't leave my house, dealing with a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, and my body was just always tired. I was tired, and that was from waking up to the end of the day. And a lot of those times, or a lot of those days of the week, I wasn't doing a whole lot of things to be that tired and to feel like I was lifting heavy weights all day. I was tired. And through all of the healing, I got back into the gym and I said, I'm going to focus on this as best as I can, because it's not only good for my physical health, but good for my mental health as well. And so I started moving around a lot more. And so I'm not really sure if that fully answers your question, but I went from being very stagnant and also having just that feeling in my stomach when you're so anxious about things and you're hanging on to so many things that it's just like, it's like a ball, not even a ball. It's like having a rock in your stomach and you're not getting proper nutrition because you don't feel well. You don't feel well enough to eat, or you don't feel hungry. So not taking care of myself physically, and then getting this healing and talking and releasing it, that feeling, that rock, it's like it got smaller and smaller and smaller. And like I mentioned, I got back into the gym. I was taking care of my nutrition a little more. So being mindful of what I'm eating and overall just trying to be well, as opposed to doing nothing prior to. So again, I'm not sure if that's kind of what you were asking, but the healing really helps us with direction too in our lives. Or it helped me for sure. Because during the program, again, there's a lot of support from everyone else. And, we talk about things that we want in life or things we want to achieve. We talk about dreams. Like there's so many things that we're talking about. And there's a lot of things I shared that I wanted. And one thing for me was I've always been creative. I've always been into like clothing, makeup, all of these things. And as a kid, that was my dream, to be like a fashion designer, and I'd be sketching dresses and everything. And I realized I wasn't good with a sewing machine. So I'm like, that's not an option for me. So I started a small, I can't really say it's a small business, but like a small little project. And I've been setting up little pop-up shops here and there. I have like all of my horror items, so like hair clips and
I recently had a local artist draw me up a logo, and I got it printed on a sweatshirt, and I got stickers made, and I've been doing these shows, and I sell some of my items at a local store in town. And, just these things, like just people wanting to support as well, like, hey, can we sell your items in our store? And, people just, wow, like, where can I buy this? How much is this? And the interest, like, it's a completely different type of support, but it's like I'm still feeling like that love, of like people sharing an interest in horror, which I know is completely different from supporting someone who's gone through something traumatic, but there's still that same love that's there. And so I'm feeling a lot of that lately. And I feel that's also uplifting for me. It's just nice to see people supporting people.
That yeah, it makes me think of sort of a part of my story that's sort of been like I don't know, as I was listening to you, it sort of came like a sort of unraveling over years. Like there's this sense of Brent from over a decade ago that felt they had to like do everything on their own, and have some kind of confidence that wasn't real, and not any like more tender or vulnerable parts. And it feels like the healing journey has been one of opening up and even allowing there to be a sense of support known. Like it's still a difficult thing to even recognize where someone is actually supporting me. So yeah, just I'm really appreciating that part of what you're speaking about, and how it's a big part of what we're trying to cultivate in all of this is the being together in it, and it not being a solo path, the healing not being a solo path. There is really a conviction that it can't be. It just can't be. So maybe I talk a little bit about like how I got to this place too. There's this story. It's a bit of a ridiculous story. I don't think I'll tell the whole story because it's so ridiculous, but it's like this point in time that's so clear when things started to, I said, unravel. And it really does feel like a part of that. Like it was this sort of moment of recognition that like, oh, like things need to change, Brent, and up until that point, it feels like there was this sort of like blindness around just how I was being, and a lot of what sort of veiled, I guess, my sight was just an incapacity to be with hurt and anger. I have this image that I've shared with some people in the past of like this sort of walking along the shore, and they're sort of like bodies sort of strewn, like on the shore, and these sort of represent relationships that I've had that have just sort of disintegrated over time, and in large part because of my incapacity to be with discomfort in those situations, and how anger and aggression and violence led to the end of so many relationships, friendships, and more intimate relationships. And then this story of this moment where I guess I was kind of exposed, and not only the person that I cared for the most in that moment was sort of on the receiving end of this aggression, but people who were around, friends who were around, sort of also were witnessing this, these outbursts, and it was like, oh shit, like this can't be a good way to keep living. Yeah. And that moment led me to meditation. And as a way in the beginning, it was a way to sort of like, as though I needed to change. Like there was this sense of I need to change, I need to be different, which I realize now isn't what healing is about. But that path, eventually led to a place of understanding what this beast was. That's what that's what I would call it, this beast inside that would lash out so easily, when I would feel just the slightest sense of rejection, the slightest sense of misunderstanding, there would be this charge that I didn't know what to do with, and it would just come out as an outburst, it would come out as yelling, it would come out as violence and or so hurt. It would be the hurt that I would feel would just end up hurting other people. And I think that's one of the places where the healing through the body has been so helpful, because there's been so much softening around this discomfort that I still experience regularly, but my relationship to it has changed. And I think that's a big part of the healing process, like changing the relationships to experience, really. And so it's become these same kind of charges that are still alive in me. More and more, they've become things that I can honor, like messages that I recognize as telling me that something is happening, but over time, sort of building a capacity to listen to it means that I don't need to run away anymore, that I don't need to put it out on somebody else, and sort of recognizing that it doesn't have to bring me into the stories that I would all of a sudden tell myself about these other people who I felt were doing this, or or whatever, this feeling, like thinking this thing about me or that thing, just the stories we make up about other people that we don't actually know are real or not. So this being with these charges as they show up has been a way to really soften into relationship. And that's allowed me to be closer to people, more caring and more loving. This is a bit ridiculous, but just the other day with my son, so my youngest child, like we were in the car, and there was no water in the car, but he wanted water, and we were driving along the highway in the middle of there was nowhere to stop. We were not going to get anything, and he just didn't stop saying, "I want water." And so, in this moment, there's this wanting to stop the car and turn around and just like,
I know. Yeah.
and to yell, and to all the craziness that shows up, in ways that sometimes I'm even scared of, like, whoa, my mind was like really, really going real quickly to these sort of scary things, and then in that moment, there was this spaciousness enough to be like, okay, this is just what it's going to be. And allowing myself to be with the buildup of that, that frustration and the like anger, and watch it, and just sort of watch it, and watch what would happen with it. All of a sudden, it became a curiosity, like, okay, what is this going to show me if I just listen to it? And it was crazy how just in the matter of moments, it all of a sudden subsided, and there was no more charge. Obviously there was the understanding that like this was still going to go on, and and it might go on for the rest of the drive, and that wasn't cool. But there was no need for all that other stuff, like the acting out, we might call it, it just, the need for that really went away. And I could just be with this is really sucky as a situation right now, which also allowed for space for the compassion towards my son. Like this poor guy. I mean, he's just really thirsty. But I mean, it's a stupid story, but there's something in these moments that could so easily lead to something else. I so easily could have been that dad that would just do that thing, and then he would have shut up, and then it would have been that, that would have been the end of it. But there's more and more of this understanding of how his system is taking in my charge. And I don't want that. That's that's what I had to deal with, And so as I've been going through these healing processes, not just meditation, but, other ways that are tapping into what does the body have to say. It's been interesting to it's like two wires that sort of come together. I know my story. I remember the things that have happened to me in the past, the different moments of physical abuse and different moments of sexual abuse, and the loss of my mother when I wouldn't have wanted to lose her. Like, all of these things I knew, but it's like the body wasn't aware of how much pain I was carrying, and I am still carrying because of these things. And it's like this healing opens up the pathway so that the wisdom of the holding on to all of this stuff is more accessible, and then it can run its course instead of sort of being tight in there in the body and coming out in these random moments of relational discomfort and things of that nature. So yeah, it's been evident that it's not enough just to know something about myself, or just to be able to recite the story of these things that have happened to me. Going through healing pathways like that include the body I keep using that word soften, but have really allowed my system to soften around my experiences. And that maybe comes back to that sort of image I was speaking of in the beginning, like something has unraveled because of that. And this sort of hard shell that I thought I had to carry has been able to get more porous. I mean, it's still there, but it's definitely different.
I think now that you've mentioned how it opens up pathways in our body when we heal, it reminds me that once you've started your healing journey, you start to notice those things. So you're saying you noticed how you felt in the car, and you kind of just focused on it rather than like you felt it and you acted on it, which it's normal that we do that. But I feel when you've been through these healing experiences, you do stop. You take a pause. And I notice that's something that I do a lot if I get upset about something. I kind of stop for a second. Okay, why do I have this feeling towards this situation? And I'm able to analyze it and understand it better, where it comes from or why I may have felt that way, instead of just acting on an emotion. So I think I understand your question from before a little bit more now that we've kind of talked about it a little bit. But yeah, when you start your healing, it's going to open up those different responses, right, to different situations. And it's interesting, I think, because we have a lot of these bigger reactions sometimes after trauma, right? So either trauma responses, so either we're freezing or we're running away from something. And I noticed myself doing that a lot more too after my experience. But yeah, I think meditation was also something that I started to do last summer. And I feel like that's really what helps you take that pause, right? Is when you're meditating, it's kind of cut everything else out and just focus on what's happening within that time. But I'm interested to know how or why you chose meditation. Like, what was it about meditation that you were like, okay, I think this is the right route for me?
That's a good question. So I think when the journey started, I didn't know the journey had started yet. Like this healing journey, like I was saying before, I really thought I needed to change something. I needed to be someone different. I couldn't be that Brent anymore. And so I went into this practice with that somewhere in the back of my mind. It wasn't necessarily in the forefront, like, okay, you're doing a 30-day challenge or whatever. But I discovered some years after having started to practice that I was driven by something that was still really rigid. I would sit and practice every morning and not get anywhere. And I'm doing the sort of quotation marks. That was my understanding. Like I wasn't doing something properly. And it really took some time. And really that's when I started to meet people. I was doing this sort of on my own, and then I started to meet people in the community. And these people were helping me to recognize that there were questions I could ask about my experience. And I started to recognize like, oh, I'm actually doing this practice really in a way that is not so good for me. And so you talked about trauma response. Like my trauma responses were all over my intentions, like really forming the ways that I was going into practicing meditation. And so my practice changed over time. And so I think one of the things that keeps me, it's not really the question you asked, but one of the things that keeps me in this practice now is the way that this sort of pausing and softening into my experience, like having a curiosity about like, what is this? What's going on right now, has allowed tapping into this inherent wisdom. So I talked about confidence a while ago in my story, and there's this recognition of something that's been developing that's more of something like a faith, but not necessarily faith in the religious sense, but like a faith in the unfolding of an experience, like that things are occurring the way they're occurring and that it can be okay. And there's something in this practice that has allowed that okayness to develop. And so through that okayness, really touching into this, just all that a moment has to tell me about what is going on. And I think particularly about like, having this kind of posture in a relationship with another being. So I find this so difficult, but one of these things that I have recognized, perhaps especially with my children, is that the moment is going to tell me everything I need to know about what needs to happen. My children, they know somewhere exactly what it is that they need. I don't need a book. I don't need a course. I just need to listen. And if I'm listening in that moment, then everything that I need to know is there. So the practice of meditation has allowed me to sort of tap into that, in part by this developing capacity to listen. And a part of that capacity is really just in the wanting to listen. I didn't want to hear these things, and like I say that, like, it's not like I was choosing, but there was parts of me that they couldn't hear what was going on. They couldn't hear the hurt that was trying to sort of scream out and be like, hey, like this is what's going on with you. So that practice has definitely helped with that.
Well, thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah. Thank you, Adrienne. I think, we're hoping to help to, create spaces where these kinds of pathways can be discovered, rediscovered, or deepened for this community.
I think on our next episode, we can probably elaborate on somatic healing. I think today we both covered a lot of grounds about ourselves. So on our next episode, we'll talk more about that and maybe share some of our own experiences with somatic healing during our healing journey, how it helped. Well, I enjoyed chatting with you, as always. There's always good conversation. This time wasn't too many jokes. Usually we're a lot more, it's a lot more comedic, but
hopefully we weren't too serious for folks.
We were very serious. Very.
It's the dim light in here.
Thank you for listening to the first episode of our limited series podcast about somatic healing with Brent and Adrienne from KSCS.
Oh.
The views and opinions of the guests expressed in this podcast do not reflect those of wase and its employees.